Hi, welcome to the Information Advice and Support Services training on elective home education for children with special educational needs and disabilities. My name is Lorna Crawford and I'm a Shropshire IASS officer. As we go through the training, it'd be helpful if you could just keep a note of any of your questions and then you can send them to us and we can get back to you. I'll explain how to do that a bit later on in the training. We'll be having a look at the meaning of elective home education, what the law says about home education, making the decision to home educate, deciding to return to school and where to find out more information. The relevant statutory guidance is found in the SEND Code of Practice 2015 and that's in Chapter 10, which looks at children and young people in specific circumstances. There's also relevant law around elective home education in the Education Act of 1996. And then there's two pieces of elective home education guidance, one for local authorities and one for parents, which is published by the Department of Education in 2019. The emphasis in all these is on the parent's right to home educate, as well as the duty of the local authority to work with parents to ensure the suitability of that education. So it's important to understand the effect that your decision to choose to home educate your child with SEND could have on the special educational provision that they receive. We're going to look generally at elective home education and then more specifically at the implications of choosing that if your child has an EHCP or if they attend a special school. So we'll look at the process to follow, the follow-up from the LA and what to do if you change your mind about choosing home education. This definition sets out the meaning of elective home education. Elective home education is when a parent chooses not to send their child to school full-time, but assumes responsibility for making sure that their child receives a full-time education other than at school. Some children are electively home educated from age 5 and may never attend school. In other cases, a child may be removed from their school's role for elective home education. In the elective home education guidance for parents, it states the responsibility for a child's education rests with their parents. In England, education is compulsory, but school is not. So elective home education can be a very positive choice, particularly when it's carried out with proper regard for the needs of the child. There are often very good reasons and very different reasons for choosing home education, and it may be that a parent feels that they're an expert on their child and can meet their needs most effectively. There can be a lot of flexibility around choosing to home educate in terms of curriculum and hours that parents may choose to teach. But that there also can be challenges. For instance, it may mean a parent may not be able to work, and it may mean that it's very difficult to get specialist support for your child. And the cost of that may be prohibitive to you. So you do need to think through the implications of your choices. It's important to look at some of the words in this. Elective home education is a really important part of it. It's about choosing home education. It's about not feeling, as long as you're not feeling forced into home education as a last resort because there's a risk of exclusion or prosecution for non-attendance, or perhaps because the SEN support your child is receiving at school you feel is insufficient to meet their needs. If you're in a situation where a school says they cannot meet your child's needs, then the next step would be to request an educational healthcare needs assessment, or if they have an EHCP, an emergency review to amend the EHCP. And again, if they have an EHCP and your child needs more support, then what may be more, the best route is to make sure they get a higher level of special educational provision is to put that in section F of the EHCP, or request a different setting or placement in section I, rather than deciding to take them away from school altogether and removing the right to receive special educational provision through the local authority. I think what we're saying here is that it's a very big decision which can affect the whole family, and it's really important just to be aware of all your choices and all the implications of your choices. Section 7 of the Education Act 1996 states that the parent or carer of every child of compulsory school age shall cause him or her to receive efficient full-time education suitable to his or her age, aptitude and ability, and to any special educational needs he or she may have, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. So the parent's right to educate their child at home applies equally where a child has special educational needs. And then if we have a look, compulsory school age date is that following their 5th birthday, and then a child ceases to be of compulsory school age on the last Friday of June during the year that they become 16. If we have a look at full time, it's important to understand that that doesn't mean that a child is expected to have a full-time education as they would at school. It's not expected that they would have the same curriculum or fixed times or hours. There are many ways of providing elective home education, and it's very clear in the guidance that full-time doesn't mean that parents have to follow a timetable or impose fixed days, times, hours, or anything similar to a school day. But the local authority does need to be satisfied that the home education being provided is suitable to your child's needs, whether they have special educational needs or not. And it can be sensible to be able to show this with a record of work that's done and examples of projects or evidence of educational visits, just so all this can be demonstrated to the local authority if they ask. Home tuition is different to elective home education. It's usually a short-term solution to a specific difficulty a child is having. They may have a health need such as glandular fever or chronic fatigue syndrome, and in this instance it's seen as a short-term solution to a difficulty. So a child isn't taken off the school roll, and the idea is they will be reintegrated into the school. It usually takes place in consultation with the school and the local authority, and so it's elective home education is a long-term decision, and a child is taken off the school roll, so it's a different situation. There's also education otherwise than at school, and this doesn't happen very often. It's not the norm. It usually happens when it's not appropriate for a child to be educated within a school, and that could be because of the complexity of their SEN, or maybe because the special educational provision required isn't available within a school setting, or it could be because they have very complex health needs which can't be accommodated in a school. So it's a very different situation to choosing elective home education. When you choose to home educate, you as a parent take on the financial responsibility for your child's education, so you wouldn't be getting any help with the cost of teaching your child at home, and that would include you may be paying for resources, equipment, books, trips, exams if your child is taking GCSEs or A-levels, and it would also include the cost of any therapies such as speech and language therapy. Schools don't provide any kind of support because your child will have been taken off the school roll, and the local authority may offer support and advice if you request that, but any support provided would only be for the costs associated as a result of the special educational needs of the child. There is a named officer who you would be able to find on the local offer pages on Shropshire Council's website. The actual process of choosing to electively home educate is a straightforward administrative process. It's when a parent notifies the school in writing that they're choosing to home educate. At that point, the school must delete the child's name from the admission register, which means they get taken off the school roll, and the school then inform the local authority. Parents aren't under any legal duty to register their decision to home educate with the local authority, but it can be helpful to inform them, and it's important to know that if you do this, then when your child is withdrawn from school for home education, the school have no obligation to keep that place open. So if you then wish to return your child to school, they would have to go through the admission system again. There's no right to return to the same school. If your child has an EHCP and you choose to home educate them, then the local authority still have a duty to maintain it and to review it annually. So you don't just automatically lose an EHCP because you choose to home educate. But it also doesn't mean that the local authority has a duty to secure the special educational provision in the plan. They don't have to provide the special educational provision even though the EHCP still stands. What would happen is that it would normally be specified in the plan that the parent is making suitable alternative arrangements for the child's education by home educating, and that would be written into the plan. If the local authority aren't satisfied that the child with an EHCP has suitable alternative arrangements, then it can name a school in section I of the EHCP and take action against a parent if they choose not to send their child to that school. Or possibly the local authority could choose to offer a financial contribution to the child's special educational provision, but that could be withdrawn at any point. It's discretionary, and the kind of funding that the local authority offer for that could be withdrawn at any point. It's not something that could be relied upon. It's also important to be aware that if a child SEN that's identified in the EHCP is related to the school environment and the child's needs can be met at home, then it's possible that the local authority may consider ceasing to maintain the EHCP. So it's just important to be aware of these implications if you make the choice to home educate if your child has an EHCP. If your child is at special school and you choose to home educate, you will need to get permission from the local authority to take your child's name off the school roll. The elective home education guidance for local authorities states that the process shouldn't be unnecessarily complex and consent should not be withheld unreasonably. The local authority can refuse your request to home educate. And if they do that, then you can appeal their decision not to change the EHCP. The Centre Code of Practice states that local authorities should not assume that because the provision being made by parents is different from that which is being made in school, that the provision is necessarily unsuitable. Local authorities should also consider using their power to help parents make suitable provision. This is also reiterated in the elective home education guidance, and it's putting emphasis on the fact that parents don't need to follow the national curriculum. They don't need to mark work or formally assess their child's progress or set development objectives. Guidance recognises there are a lot of different valid approaches to education, and parents, because they're teaching their child one-to-one, they don't need to copy the school the way the school does it by working to a timetable or fixed hours. Parents take very different approaches, do it very differently. Some may employ tutors or use distance learning courses and a formal curriculum, and others will be more child-led and where they follow their interests with a mix of academic learning, and it may involve a lot of trips out to museums and gardens and being active in the local community. There are as many different approaches as there are home educating parents, and it's when someone chooses to home educate, it is recognised that it won't be done in the same way as it is in a school setting, and the same hours won't be required. It's up to you what you teach your child. There won't be any set curriculum when you choose to home educate. But if your child is thinking about going back into school for GCSEs, then they would need to be prepared for that in terms of curriculum and course content, so they're able to go into school and take their GCSEs. As we've said, there's no general financial help towards home educating. There is a right, if your child is aged 14 to 16, to go to further education college part-time, so that may be something to consider. There are also a number of organisations and groups that can give advice and support, and there may well be other home educating parents in your area who set up groups, and you can find details of these on Shropshire Council local offer website. The local authority may make informal inquiries to check that the home education that you're providing your child with is suitable and meets your child's needs. They don't have a power to enter the home of a family who choose home education, but they do have a duty to ensure that suitable education is being provided. So they can ask for information to check that it is suitable. The parents don't then have a duty to respond to requests for information, but it would be sensible to do so, because if the local authority don't have enough information to satisfy themselves that the education is suitable, it has the power to issue formal notice, which would give the parents a 15-day deadline for a response to provide the information. If it's not suitable, if the education isn't suitable, the local authority could issue a school attendance order, and that would remove the right to home education. And your child would then have to be registered at a school named by the local authority. The burden of proof does lie with the parent, who would need to show that they're providing suitable education with evidence. So it would be helpful to have a record of what you're teaching your child, maybe evidence of school trips and school projects and what you've been teaching them. Prosecution would be a 3-stage process if it does end up in court, and it would be different for children who have an EHCP. If you're home educating and you decide that your child is going to return to school, and that could be for any number of reasons, like a change of circumstances, or your child decides they want to return, then there are different approaches to take if your child has an EHCP or if they don't. So if they don't have an EHCP, then it would be a matter of following the school admissions process, contacting them and finding out about school place availability, and then you could contact the SENCO at school and talk about a reintegration plan for your child. If they do have an EHCP, then the thing to do would be contact the SEN team at the LA. It's likely that your child's EHCP would need to be changed. In section I of the placement, that would need to name the school place, and the SEN team would need to find a school place for your child. And once the place is found, then a reintegration plan could be set up with the school and the SENCO and the parents to make sure your child's needs are met at school. That concludes our training. If you've got any questions, please email us at ias@cabshropshire.org.uk. If you just write EHE question in the subject line and then follow that with your question, and we'll get back to you with an answer to your query. Thanks for listening.